This is AM Agenda with Kieran Gilbert.
Good morning and welcome to the program. Tony Abbott believes Malcolm Turnbull needs to extend an olive branch to him and offer him his predecessor a position in cabinet in order to end division within the Liberal Party. Looks like the best course of action, according to Mr Abbott's close friend and former senior military aide, Catherine McGregor. And Catherine McGregor joins me now. Thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure, Kieran.
Very interesting piece you've written in the Daily Telegraph this morning.
Apparently so. I'm surprised at the response.
You're getting a lot of attention indeed.
Apparently, yeah.
Give us a sense of, for viewers who haven't read the piece,
Yeah.
what's the main point in it?
Look, Tony and I just had a chat about his future over the last couple of days, and I asked him, was it okay to write that? And we were talking about the events of last week, which weren't great for either him or the government or Prime Minister Turnbull. And look, his view is that he's absolutely committed to the re-election of the government. He thinks that he thinks he's in a lose-lose situation. He's accused of wrecking if he speaks on issues, he's accused of wrecking if he defends his legacy, and he's accused of destabilising if he does the normal things that a backbencher does, namely accept speaking invitations. As a former Prime Minister, he gets invited to do a lot of speaking, especially to the constituency Liberal Party. And he just said, pragmatically, he would be more constrained if he were to be a member of the government back in the ministry. He would honour that, and it would impose limitations on him, whereas he doesn't feel constrained at the moment. He's not actively trying to destabilise the government, but everything he says is seen through that prism, through no fault of his own. And the area that interests him, of course, is Indigenous affairs. He's had a history in that of some long period of standing, and he's got good connections to key stakeholders in that area and a passion for it. So that's an area that commends itself to him, that where he could add value. Well,
I guess a lot of people are very interested in this today and want to talk to you because you are close friends with Mr Abbott, and also because of the point that you started with, and that is that you would have got his approval to make this point.
He knew the remarks were for publication. We spoke on the basis that I would be filing something, and I said, is it okay if I didn't attribute anything directly, but I made it clear that we had spoken, and he was comfortable with that.
And it's pretty clear what the point is, that he feels that the best way forward for the government, which, as you say, he wants re-elected, is for him to return to the cabinet. But is there any guarantee that he would then rein in the commentary?
He addressed that absolutely directly, and he would consider himself bound absolutely by cabinet solidarity, and he said he wouldn't be a wrecker. He would honour the obligations of being a cabinet minister and serve with loyalty. One thing that I think's been missing from this equation thus far is that this is megaphone diplomacy from both of them, and the events of last week were diabolical for the government. I think John Howard has a role to play in this as an elder statesman now. I think he was critical to Tony Abbott of Peter Credlin, and that led to a friction between them. Abbott was a loyalist of Howard's, and he felt let down a bit that John was not as enthusiastic in fending off the Turnbull challenge as he may have been. But they still have regard for one another.
Because Mr Howard did give Tony Abbott, the former Prime Minister,
some advice
along the lines of his staffing and so on.
And I didn't have that discussion with him, but I actually said to Tony that I thought he should replace Joe Hockey with Malcolm Turnbull as well. I always thought that was a terrible blunder, not to put someone with Turnbull's ballast and economic cred into the Treasury. I thought it was an oversight. And I have to say, in fairness to Malcolm Turnbull, even though I'm a friend of Tony's, that he mustn't feel he owes Tony Abbott much, given that, in a sense, when that he was never elevated the way that he may well have been had Tony made him Treasurer, for instance. But I think we've got to accept that the two of them need to iron this out for the good of the party. And I think John Howard has a conciliatory role to play here, to get them together, to work out a way forward, because at the moment it's quite clear that this is a media discussion, and the events in the Parliament last week were really, the optics of that were dreadful.
And Catherine McGregor, just one last question in relation to this, and this is what some of Mr Abbott's critics will undoubtedly say today within the party and beyond it, is why does he need to be brought within the cabinet in order to behave and argue the government line as he should, as opposed to creating the odd headline from time to time.
Look, it's a fair point, but you've got to understand his position too. He's a former Prime Minister of Australia. He gets asked to speak internally and he gets asked to speak overseas. The Westminster system actually holds quite clearly that you are a member of the government if you're in the ministry. Backbenchers, by convention, are actually entitled to speak out on other matters, and most do. It's just that this unique problem that he has is that he's a former Prime Minister, and when you get an opinion column written by someone who's just happened to have had an idle chat with him, it suddenly becomes newsworthy, which is neither his fault. It's more a systemic problem that we don't handle former Prime Ministers very well.
Catherine McGregor, thanks so much. We'll talk about the Test match coming up at another time.
I'd love to talk cricket.
We will do that. It'll be a nice, more relaxed chat. Thanks so much.
Indeed.